早安，大家！开场一样，喜欢我们直播欢迎点赞、订阅、开启小铃铛，然后一起来直播上面聊聊天哦。OK， 今天是蒙特祖马阿兹特克人，一样先来看一下阿兹特克人的历史吧。来喽，特别的音乐。1100年，人口稠密的墨西哥中央峡谷地区的政治一片混乱，因为北方来了一群阿兹特克人往峡谷迁移，并且侵占了大湖周围的几个城镇，势力壮大，崇尚武力的社会，一直到15世纪末期控制整个墨西哥中部，而且甚至会向那个敌对部落获取共金的军事帝国。阿兹特克的文化承接过去的文明跟经验就停滞不前了，没什么新的发现，依靠着庞大的人口来支撑农业，兴建雄伟的巨大建筑，还有很多美工的艺术。他们没有看过铁，因为没有适合拖拉的动物，所以没有发明轮子。阿兹特克文化有一个特色是喜欢用祭品，有个传说说必须每天使用人的鲜血供奉太阳，才有办法从太阳才会从东边升起来。用活人当祭品的数量很可观啊，1天用掉几千人是很常有的事情。这些人通常被斩首或是剥皮，或是被活挖出心脏带到金字塔的顶端，让血沿着台阶流下。因为阿兹特克的经济是依靠玉米的生产，那他们相信农作要有好收成，就要依靠祭祀鲜血。因为常常需要用活人祭祀，他们不太在乎对附属城市的控制。反抗起来的话，反而刚好可以有新的战争掠夺新的牺牲者。在和平时期，他们会严格安排一些只为了作战而作战的龙冠战争，考验武士的勇气和战绩，同时掳掠牺牲者。用木棒重劈或打击敌人，通常会装上以黑曜石做成的石刃。尽管有伟大的农业和艺术，但是还是灭亡了，没有留下任何重要的技术、宗教思想或是政治理论。文明被16世纪初来到了西班牙的摧毁，商人带来的疾病使他们元气大伤，然后一支配备的钢制武器枪炮的小型部队把他们打败。阿兹特克人的残酷也是他们灭亡的原因，因为西班牙人很容易找到别的其他的非阿兹特克人的结盟对抗他们。看一下阿兹特克人的科技树吧。第一个特色是村民的携带量会加3，所以效率会比较好。第二个是军事单位的生产速度加11%。第三个是研发每个修道院科技生旅血量都可以加5，所以而且阿兹的生旅最多可以到将近100滴血，蛮厉害的。建造完手动 TC 之后会送你50黄金，一个小小的经济加成，我觉得还好。特殊单位是暴勇士，适合攻击步兵的一个单位。对步兵的加成有加10，非常多。然后65滴血10攻，1进2远防。那我们看一下常见的长剑兵，一样血量比较少，然后攻击力少1，然后少一个远防，而且它没有对步兵的加成。然后造价跟长剑兵差不多，基本上是强化长剑兵有料。然后银冠是直毛器，你的毛兵线攻击力会加1，射程会加1，蛮厉害的。因为阿兹的工兵很弱。金冠是龙冠战争，刚好提到一个和平时期为了作战而发明的一个，算是可以说是演练吗？也不算演练，就是真的战争这样子。然后会让你的步兵系攻击力加4，非常的厉害。阿兹特克的精华。射箭场的话就是蛮烂的嘛，虽然说有强弩兵，可是没有木质环，所以不太强。但是毛兵有特殊的加成，所以蛮 OK 的。玩毛兵的话，军营的话是全满的，毕竟是只有步兵的文明嘛。但是注意是没有骑兵的。攻击器的话有重冲，有重头，还不错，只是没有火炮。兵工厂的话就是打步兵跟工兵，那工兵没有3级防御，所以后期的毛兵还是会偏软。海军的话非常的惨，你只有重型火山船可以玩，后期连重型弩炮都没有，那更不用说火炮，它是连火炮跟德罗蒙都没有，海上完全没有办法拆建筑物、拆那种城堡之类的。但是有给到船坞跟造船员啦。大学的话，该有的科技少砖瓦跟建筑学，蛮可惜的。城堡的血量会少 20%， 蛮多的。城堡的话也没有围墙，城堡血量少 40%， 好痛苦，好废啊。然后僧侣科技是全满的，僧侣大国，每个科技都有，而且每个科技都会让僧侣加5滴血。那总共有1、2、3、4、5、6、7、8、9、10。1、2、3、4、5、6、7、8、9、10，11个科技，然后这个加11个科技就有加55滴血，然后又加15滴血，所以是加70滴血。那70滴血加上僧侣原本就有30滴血吧，记得是这样，所以总共100滴血的僧侣，还是95滴血，僧侣血非常厚。 精锐爆筒升级上来之后，血量加10，攻击加2，其实调整不多，加1进防，然后对步兵的伤害只有加1而已。而且蛮贵的，升级1500，这个升级偏不划算哦。那经济科技没什么特别的，我们就不讲了。第一关，协同统治。
Passed down to you by Cuauhtémoc, eagle warrior of Tenochtitlan. An omen appeared above the forest, the shape of an ear of corn, but blazing like daybreak. It seemed to bleed fire, drop by drop, like a wound in the sky. I am a warrior, not a priest, and knew not what to make of such a sign. I consulted with the seers and magicians to see if another great war was coming. But they answered only in riddles. The gods want more sacrifice was their answer. That was always their answer. Much of our empire of rainforest and volcanoes has been conquered in the name of sacrifice. The magicians tell us that we must make a sacrifice every single day for the sun to continue to rise. It took the relay teams 2 full days to carry my message the 200 miles to our city of Tenochtitlan. After 2 more days, my uncle Montezuma, Emperor of the Aztecs, sent his reply. Montezuma's priest foretold that the god Quetzalcoatl might soon return from his long exile. How else to explain the omen? Montezuma ordered my warriors to increase their efforts to consolidate the rainforest between our land and those of our enemies. We must establish control over 4 shrines that are sacred to Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. Because the Aztec Empire is mighty and constantly expands, we have made many enemies. We must defend these shrines from our enemies in order to prepare for Quetzalcoatl's eventual return.
占领4个圣坛，然后各放一个圣物，75人口而已。城堡时代要保护祭坛不能被摧毁，然后升级之后很强大，占领的祭坛就可以召唤僧侣，目前是不能自己盖这样子。那现在是封建时代，只有几个士兵，有3个敌人呐、红色是我们的老对手啊，基本上1到5关都会看到他们。还有个橙色以及紫色，出发。
When my warriors had captured the shrines and defeated the Xochimilcan and Tlatelolco, we made the long journey back to Tenochtitlan, laden with gifts for Emperor Montezuma, jade, feathers, and of course, prisoners. The sheer vastness of our city on the lake seems staggering after having been in the rainforest for so many days. Emperor Montezuma lives in the most sumptuous rooms of the palace with his wives and concubines. While we spoke, he drank frothing chocolate from a golden cup. Musicians played their drums and flutes, and masked women danced. When my uncle Montezuma first ascended the Great Pyramid many years ago to become emperor, there was a great celebration. Yet now, some question his leadership. He sometimes makes decisions slowly, and rarely does he lead the warriors into combat. Montezuma's priest informed us that Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, would soon return to Tenochtitlan to reclaim his kingdom. Since I had helped prepare for his coming, I was given a new obsidian macana and promoted to the rank of jaguar warrior. There was more feasting and dancing that night. The air was heavy with perfume. However, I noticed as I walked down the steps of the Emperor's palace that the omen still hung heavily over the lake, spraying sparks over the midnight sky. So says Cuauhtémoc, jaguar warrior of Tenochtitlan.
那我们就进第2关吧，3城同盟。
Passed down to you by Cuauhtémoc, jaguar warrior of Tenochtitlan. The gods were still uneasy, for another omen appeared that same year. The temple of the demon Huitzilopochtli burst suddenly into flames, although it was made of stone. When the people hurried to pour water on the fire, it burned with even greater violence. I asked our Emperor Montezuma what we needed to do to appease the gods. His haughty priests made that predictable reply. The Aztec Empire needed more prisoners, The sun god, the rain god, and even the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl were angry deities that required sacrifice. Our city-state of Tenochtitlan is allied with 2 others, together composing the Triple Alliance. Montezuma intended for the Triple Alliance to attack our longtime enemies, the Tlaxcala. I sent the traditional shield, arrows, and cloaks to the Tlaxcala, declaring to them that they would soon be attacked. Then, we marched out into the forests, our jaguar and eagle banners ready to clash with the heron banners of the Tlaxcala. Birds in the rainforest canopy took to the sky, eager to be away from the violence that was to come.
要把战争令传给2个城镇中心，然后100人口城堡。派英勇士为城镇找个合适的位置。阿兹特克人有2支强大步兵单位，就是暴勇跟英勇。小心特拉斯卡拉战舰，然后只有几个英勇士要拜访2个成员，特拉斯克潘跟特斯科科，要打败北方的邪恶之城特拉斯卡拉。好。
But wait, what is this that approaches?
I claim these lands and all of the gold they bear in the name of Charles of Spain. Until all of the gold is brought to me, I shall not return home. To prove it, I am sinking my ships.
Who is this man who has arrived? Could it be that the god Quetzalcoatl has returned? The first messengers to arrive in Tenochtitlan told of mountains or towers that floated on the sea. Each story told to Montezuma was more fantastic than the last. They could fire stone balls, shooting sparks and raining fire that could crack open weapons. Huge deer with no antlers carried these gods on their backs. Their swords were iron, their bows were iron, their shields were iron, and their clothes were iron. Surely this was the return of Quetzalcoatl. Montezuma heard these reports with growing alarm as he shifted nervously on the Ikbali, his legless throne. He ordered expensive gifts to be sent to the new arrivals in the hopes that Quetzalcoatl would spare Montezuma when the feathered serpent came to Tenochtitlan. He has come back, Montezuma whispered to me. He seeks his place on the throne, for that is what he promised when he departed. I held my weapons tightly but said nothing. How could I challenge the word of our emperor? So says Cuauhtémoc, jaguar warrior of Tenochtitlan.
第3关了，玉蛇神。
Passed down to you by Cuauhtémoc, jaguar warrior of Tenochtitlan. Another omen. The lake around the great city of Tenochtitlan rose and boiled. It foamed until it washed against the houses of the city, sweeping many of them into the lake. I accompanied our dignitaries to meet with the new arrivals. We journeyed towards the coast, through the lands of our enemies, the Tlaxcala. When we emerged from the forest, the strangers welcomed us, although they kept their weapons nearby. I told them that we were Aztecs, representatives of the great Montezuma. Their leader said that his people were Spanish, and he named himself Cortés, although he seemed pleased when we referred to him as Quetzalcoatl. Although their armor and animals seem otherworldly, they did not seem like gods to me. We presented Cortés gifts of finest cotton and plumes of bird feathers, but he seemed more interested in the gold ornaments. He asked again and again if there was more gold to be found in Tenochtitlan. By now, Cortés had advanced all the way to the lands of the Tlaxcala. There was initial warfare made between Tlaxcala and the Spanish. However, when Cortés heard stories about the size of Tenochtitlan and the number of our brave Aztec warriors, he suggested that the Spanish and the Tlaxcala join forces and attack the Aztecs.
打败特拉斯卡拉，帝王100人口。盟友塔巴斯科跟敌人很接近。西班牙野兽可以派上用场，就是马。雨林是美洲豹的家人，小心。好嘞。好，南部有要塞，中间是一大片悬崖，然后以北是我的盟友塔巴斯科，拜拜。西边是红色，然后东面是西班牙人。
For now, our enemies are the Tlaxcala. Although the Aztec warriors fought well that day, my men were frightened by the beasts that the Spanish rode into combat, and by the noise of their exploding weapons. Although we had survived the attack, I thought it best to withdraw towards Tenochtitlan and share with Emperor Montezuma all that we had learned. I don't know if my uncle Montezuma was being cowardly or merely trying to preserve us from the wrath of the gods, but he sent more gifts to Cortés along with an invitation to visit our great city as his personal guest. I was there when Montezuma met Cortés on one of the causeways leading into our great city. The Spanish had evidently never seen anything like Tenochtitlan, and they stared in wonder at the brightly colored markets and pyramids rising out of a man-made island in the middle of a gigantic lake, Texcoco. Some of the Spanish soldiers asked whether it was all a dream, the first glimpse of things never heard, seen, or dreamed before. Montezuma led Cortés to the top of the Great Pyramid, where he pointed out the various canals and neighborhoods of the city. But Cortés was mostly interested in gold ornaments, and helped himself to any which he encountered. I was no longer convinced that this man was Quetzalcoatl. So says Cuauhtémoc, Jaguar warrior of Tenochtitlan.
第4关悲痛之夜。
Passed down to you by Cuauhtémoc, prisoner of Tenochtitlan. The next omen we did not see, but heard. The voice of a weeping woman who cried in the night that she could not hide her children. Indecision plagued Emperor Montezuma. Was this man Quetzalcoatl, or was he just a man? As the emperor brooded, the citizens grew restless. Cortés kept a close watch on the emperor, and soon Montezuma became a prisoner in his own palace. Thus did the Spanish take Tenochtitlan without a siege. The Spanish collected all of the gold they could find. They were not interested in our art or ornaments, but merely melted down the gold for the return to Spain. They also outlawed any further sacrifice to the gods. When the priests protested, they were killed. The citizens and warriors of Tenochtitlan were enraged. We knew, even if our emperor did not, that these men were not gods. Riots broke out in the marketplace and at the palace. When Montezuma himself appeared on the walls urging the Aztecs to be at peace, the people threw stones at him. It was time to remove these so-called gods from Tenochtitlan.
摧毁西班牙的奇观，好嘞，100人口。只要准备好战斗之后，尽量避免冲突，用英勇士去侦查，用枪兵、毛兵处理，可以破坏一些建筑物。好，有个暴勇士领导，要先集结兵力。红色沿着湖的北根提到，蓝色占领了城。
I must make my way back to Tenochtitlan and end the Spanish influence there. But how? The Spanish called it La Noche Triste, which meant the night of sorrows in their language. At first, the Spanish barricaded themselves in our homes and palaces, but we continuously attacked their quarters. With stones, slings, and arrows, we drove the Spanish and Tlaxcalans through the streets of Tenochtitlan and across the 3 bridges and over the walls into Lake Texcoco. Thousands died. Those Spanish that were not killed by macanas or javelins were drowned by the weight of the treasure they refused to leave behind. Tenochtitlan lay in ruin, but the city was ours again. Many brave Aztec warriors died that night as well, including noble Montezuma. The Spanish claimed that our own people had killed him with thrown stones. Thus, it was a night of sorrows for us as well. So says Cuauhtémoc, defender of Tenochtitlan.
我们第5关，沸腾之湖。
Passed down to you by Cuauhtémoc, Emperor of Tenochtitlan. The death of Montezuma only served to further inflame the fury of my people. I plan to lead the attack personally against the Spanish. That is as it should be, Cuauhtemoc, the priests told me, for you are now our emperor. I took my place on the Iqbali throne, and the headdress of the emperor was placed upon my head. A crown is never a comfortable thing to wear. Cortés had still not made it far from Tenochtitlan, for the Spanish were weighed down with our stolen gold. As they fled around the shores of the lake, my warriors pursued them in canoes. I sent additional warriors by land, for it was obvious now that Cortés was attempting to flee back to the safety of his allies in Tlaxcala. We caught up with the Spanish on the north side of Lake Texcoco.
打败蓝色、红色150人口，有西班牙火炮战船，基本上要出火战船了。霸王是可以对抗步兵，可真可惜阿兹特克人不会驯马，所以就是暗示我们可以出马这样子。补给被切断了，好嘞，一开始就在逃亡了。北面有个联合要塞，行。
The Spanish shall never again set foot in Tenochtitlan. Let none escape our blades. I hoped that the surviving Spanish on the edge of the lake could see as their captured comrades were dragged up the steps of the Great Pyramid. Perhaps they would then understand why we feared the wrath of the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl. Perhaps they would know fear as well. With the fighting having subsided, there was much work to be done. Our city had suffered much from the Spanish occupation and the fighting in the streets. The priests set out to repair the temples, for the Spanish had cast down the idols that we had placed there. We began a celebration to give thanks to the gods, when a great plague struck Tenochtitlan. Many of our people became helpless and could only lie in their beds. Many others died. We did not know if the gods were still unhappy with us, or if this was some weapon unleashed by the Spanish. Regardless, if Cortés returned, he would find a much weakened city. I could not let that happen. So says Cuauhtemoc, Emperor of Tenochtitlan.
好，我们走了，第6关，折戟沉沙。
Passed down to you by Cuauhtemoc, Emperor of Tenochtitlan. The Spanish will return soon. I had hoped that Cortés would continue fleeing back from whence he came, but he had stopped to regroup at Tlaxcala. I imagined that he could not stand the thought of returning to Spain while we still had treasuries of gold hidden from him. Still dreaming of gold and glory, the Spanish pledged themselves to another assault on Tenochtitlan. In Tlaxcala, Cortés constructed many warboats on dry land. Then he had the crafts broken down and carried through the rainforest, only to be rebuilt on Lake Texcoco. He knows that my Aztec warriors can defend the bridges leading into Tenochtitlan, but we are vulnerable from the water. I called the warriors to one final battle. The priests attempted to encourage the troops by calling upon the Aztecs to defend their ancient gods and their glorious city. They sent up smoke signals to declare that the Aztecs were ready for war as I climbed the steps of the great temple and sounded the shell trumpet. Tenochtitlan would be under siege soon, and the brave Aztecs would die before we would see her captured.
第一个是打败红色，就打败红色、蓝色、紫色这样子。要防止奇观被摧毁，海军要打啊，100人口，超级少啊！然后要守这2个桥，因为这个桥炸了。然后西班牙火炮战很强啊。同时你麾下也要有几招啊？会有吗？这是大城市嘛，有很多建筑都有了。绿色被包围了嘛，有红色在这里，红色的基地在这里，会从这边进攻。然后紫色在这一块，桥断掉了，基本上要想办法打海登陆。蓝色在这边西北部，然后会从这边进攻。走起。
Not so long ago, some 500,000 people called Tenochtitlan home. It is difficult to recall that this smoking ruin was once an endless city. Yet, we will rebuild. We created this island upon which our city and temples stand, and we can do it once more. The Aztec Empire has endured its greatest challenge, yet the Spanish may return in the future. I am not certain that there is a place for us in this new world. I could ask the gods for a hint of the future, but no doubt that would lead to more sacrifice, and I think there has been enough death for now. My people composed a poem to commemorate this great war that we have survived, and yet perhaps still not won. Broken spears lie in the roads. We have torn our hair in grief. The houses are roofless now, and their walls are red with blood. So says Cuauhtémoc, Emperor of Tenochtitlan.
那我们今天直播到这边喽，喜欢我们直播欢迎点赞、订阅、开小铃铛，然后一起来直播上面聊聊天哦。